This presentation on storytelling and pitching was delivered at Hyper Island on the 10th of February 2017, and the slides are also on my Twitter account at Steve Rawling. So why do we talk so much about storytelling, and how can it help us in a business setting? Well, first of all, I want you to look at a psychological experiment which is known as the Linda problem. I'm going to describe Linda, and I want you to make a mental picture as I do it. Now, Linda is 31 years old, she's single, outspoken and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Which is more probable? A. Linda works in a call centre, or B. Linda works in a call centre and is an active feminist blogger. So, think about your image of Linda, and think about which of these two is more probable. So if we assume that this area here represents all adult women, and this area, smaller, represents women who work in call centres, and let's say that this area here represents women who are active feminist bloggers. Now there will be some who are both active feminist bloggers and work in call centres, and if you thought the answer was B, that Linda works in a call centre but is also an active feminist blogger, then you are betting that she's in this smaller group rather than A, the larger group of women who just work in call centres. And the reason why a lot of people go for option B when they're given this test is because we've told a story about Linda. It's not about maths, it's about story. And the story suggests that she should be carrying on doing the things she used to do, because we want Linda's story to have a happy ending, a fulfilling ending. We don't just want her to be working in a call centre. So we bet on B, even though the maths suggests the answer should actually be A. This is what's known as the narrative fallacy, described as a limited ability to look at a sequence of facts without weaving an explanation into them. This was described by Nicholas Nassim Taleb in his book The Black Swan. And it kind of lies behind why you sometimes hear people say, don't let facts get in the way of a good story. What they're saying is, the facts are only so much use, the story is what draws people in. And story is really useful as well, because we're in a very busy information world these days, and what you're trying to say could get bumped off the front page by this. This is a picture of a horse stuck in a fence that's being photobombed by a cow. When this picture went viral, at the time the Huffington Post said, "Cow photobombs horse, we can all go home now," which meant as journalists they realised that people were not going to be talking about much else, they were just going to be sharing a funny picture. Then we looked at how you can use a dramatic story arc to create your own compelling narrative. So let's use the example of the first Star Wars film. This film is the story of Luke, who is a boy in a man's world. Luke, when we first meet him, is in what we call stasis, and stasis is the boring period at the start of a story when nothing much really happens. It's the once upon a time, and it's a period of great frustration for the hero of the story. In every story there is a triggering incident. In Luke's case, he finds a droid in the desert, and the droid has a secret message hidden inside, which is a Princess Leia saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope." And this message sends Luke off on a journey, and the first stages of the journey are very much like a dream. He meets new friends and allies. Everything seems to be going well. But it doesn't take long for that dream to turn into a nightmare, as Luke realises just what's ranged against him, the enemies who are opposing him, and the difficulty of his task. Every story usually has a crisis point, the worst point for the hero. In Luke's case, it's when his mentor, Obi-Wan, is killed. There comes a point in all stories when the hero makes a critical choice. In Luke's case, it comes quite near the end of the film, when he's flying his fighter towards the Death Star and chooses to switch off his targeting computer and to use the Force instead. And he fires his torpedo guided by the Force. This results in him blowing up the Death Star. So the climax of the film is not only the destruction of the Death Star, but it's Luke becoming a Jedi. He's gone from a boy to a man. There's another option in the stories, which is the tragic end. This usually happens when the hero makes the wrong critical choice. So if you think about the story of Macbeth, halfway through the story he chooses to murder King Duncan, and after that his tragic end is inevitable. So I asked the students to put their own foundation story, how have I got to where I am today, through this dramatic story arc. And we can see how this works for businesses too. Here's a foundation story. Unhappy with the performance of his brand new cleaner, he tried to find a better design. After 5,000 failed prototypes, he finally did it. Well, this is James Dyson's foundation story. We started selling smoothies at a music festival. We put up a big sign asking people if we should give up our jobs to make smoothies. Put a bin saying yes and a bin saying no in front of the stall. At the end of the weekend, the yes bin was full, so we resigned the next day and got cracking. And that's the foundation story of Innocent, the smoothie makers. Or how about this one? A convent girl turned nightclub singer creates iconic clothing and perfume brands. Accused of collaboration and spying during World War II, she retires with her Nazi lover to Switzerland, returns to fashion aged 71 and conquers America. This is the story of Coco Chanel. Now you can look at these brands on a story arc. Dyson, you could say the trigger is the vacuum cleaner that doesn't work very well, and the dream and the nightmare is attempting these 5,000 prototypes. Chanel, you could say, is at crisis point at the end of World War II, but decides to come back into fashion. And Innocent, you could say their critical choice happens early on in their career. Their critical choice was to give up their jobs because their customers told them to. So when you're thinking about your own story, how did I get here, your foundation story, you can ask yourself these questions. Where do I start? What's that like when I began? What's the trigger that made me want to change? What were my early successes on new allies? What were the setbacks and enemies? What was my lowest point? Where was my critical choice when I had to make a decision of what to do? What's the climax or the resolution? And you can have tragic stories when you're talking about businesses too, talking about business failures, for example. With a tragedy, you're always looking for what's the fatal flaw that brings the hero down, but also how does that fall bring light to others, and in your case it may be what did you learn from the failure of a previous business. Now go back to the website and look at 2 videos which show how one company changed the style of storytelling from a foundation story to a mentor story.